So what you don't know is I was already in a meeting with Dave Davies. My head has exploded. It's all over the desk. There's a mess. Dave, it's just unfair. Like, you're the smartest guy I know about this. In fact, when I was starting to like care about SEO just a little bit, search engine optimization, search engine positioning, I've come to learn. I was like working with Carol Alaloof, who's super smart and good. And I got to a spot and I hit a spot and she's like, let me just ask Dave a question. And it has been a ridiculous rocket ride of my ignorance ever since. It is amazing what has changed in search over a decade or more. And it is amazing what people don't know. And I don't even know how to ask you the real first question. But I have to tell you that I've told people for years, just ignore it. Like, if you have WordPress, that's probably good enough. I am so wrong. I'm so wrong. I don't know anything and I broke my website. Do you want to, I mean, I don't think anybody will understand it, but you're so good at explaining it. Can you tell like how you picked up the story of my stupid website? Like, Carol says, hey, it's broke. Now what? And what did you do?
Well, there were a few things I needed to do, and you know what? This is one of the few times for listeners that I've had a site owner going, yeah, go ahead, lay it out there, right? Like that is really rare for an SEO to just be able to go, oh, okay, I can talk about this. There were a few problems that I hit fairly regularly, and one thing is, if you have a really good client. And I did it in you, right? Like, we were working together and I was able to go, all right, I'm a doctor. It's my job to tell you, you've got this cancer living in the back of your website, right? And some of it you might feel you really like, but I need to cut it out now. And that was sort of step one, right? Was sort of going, okay, we have a big site and there's a few elements for listeners who do or don't know how Google operates. There's a few core things here that we're dealing with. We're dealing with ranking for sure, but I also want to make sure that when Chris puts out another piece of really top level content, that Google isn't distracted. There's something called crawl budget where they're only going to crawl so much of your site. Well, if we have 3,000 pages back there and we only really need 1,000 because we have so many old pieces that weren't really necessary anymore.
Sure.
You had a lot of those, and I was able to recognize them really fast because about 6 months earlier, I'd done the same thing to my site. Oh, wow. And what had happened with both you and I think, was very similar. And people who've been running websites and blogs, especially for over a decade, which both of us had,
right?
We used to not have social media. You weren't sharing a new news story on Twitter or Facebook, or it just wasn't used like that. So what did you do? You wrote 150 word blog post and it hit people's RSS feeders, right? So that's what we were doing. And so back in your archives were, I think it was about 1,800 pages that were what would be deemed now thin, drove no traffic. We're taking crawl budget and we're important for us moving forward, like for your and I's strategies heading forward, is it's removing any understanding Google might have on what today is and what does Chris do. Like, what is Chris?
Right.
When we have all of this content talking about what Chris was 10 years ago, or as I did too with mine, just some casual passing interest on a news story that I kind of thought was interesting.
Right.
That had nothing to do with branding, or it had nothing to do with search, or any of those things. So we've gotten through that. We've pillaged out that. We've maintained. Now the next step, as you know, and sort of what we were chatting a little bit about earlier, is okay, but now what? Right? Where do we want to be a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? And how are we going to measure our way through? And what do you have to do? And what do I have to do? And this, again, for your listeners who I know are aware of brand, it is a dream scenario if you're doing your own SEO or working with an SEO. It's the dream scenario for the SEO to be able to go, I know that Chris knows how to paint a word picture like nobody else, right? I know that I can go, Chris, I need you to write me these blocks of content because I understand SEO, but I need you to paint the picture for your audience that is going to resonate with them. You can talk about that way better than I can, because where SEO has changed a lot, kind of, but I used to have to do all sorts of marketing back in like 2004, 2005. I used to have to do content writing, right? Because it was sort of like marketing was just, I did it all, paid search, marketing, writing. it was all lumped under one. Now I've become kind of useless at UX stuff. I've become kind of useless at social media stuff. I'm useless at a bunch of stuff that people like you can do great, or that my wife can do great, right? Or whoever that I have, staff people who can like build sites great, right? Like nice, clean code, fantastic. I don't want to learn how to build WordPress themes.
Exactly.
So it's sort of skewed there, but now you and I get to go, okay, what do we want? And that's the discussion we had. And maybe we'll chat with your listeners again and go, okay, here's how that went in like 6 months, and go, here's how that trajectory carried forward.
Right. So let me pluck a few things out. Let me pluck a few things out. And also I just realized something. I know you're about to launch like a whole new version of your everything. And so I haven't been putting up any URLs because I want people to go to your stuff. I know you're thinking, well, don't do it right now. So you can tell me otherwise if we do want it later. But let me start here. So first off, when you said you had like 1,800 pages of this stuff, I swelled with joy. Like, yes, I do. And you were like, that's not good. Oh, okay. So I've said for I don't know how many years, and I've never updated it. Really, you should write your post to be like 300 to 500 words. That's what I say to people, and I say that because humans would prefer to read 300 to 500 words. That's not what Google's looking for, and that's not the new rules, right? You're saying 2,500. 6,000, especially with some new changes that are coming. Can we go to some real basics for content types? Like what's the right size? What's the right whatever? Like give me just like, I don't know, 3 or so best practices that any trained keyboard ape like myself could do.
Sure. And what you're alluding to is something, well, I think where you were sort of touching on is something that is just launching right now. It was actually supposed to be by the end of the year. Looks like it'll be some point early in 2021, called passage indexing, where they'll be looking at a whole page and sort of viewing each section as sort of a passage that can be indexed and ranked unto itself. Okay. To answer the top level question, if I have to answer to somebody, how long should content be?
Yes.
The default answer, and Google will say it the same as I will say it, as long as it needs to be to serve the intent of the audience. That will always be the answer. Now, who is your audience? So when I say, and I wrote a test piece, and I can use it because it's my own, so I can go, I wrote a test piece, and I put it up on Search Engine Journal, and it's on Rankbrain. It's on the algorithm Rankbrain. I've divided it up into sections, and we'll be watching how it survives through passage, because each section answers a subset question. But the idea being the intent of a user asking what is Rankbrain may be to get a thorough understanding of how the algorithm works. So it will be served better in a larger page covering multiple topics. For some people, could be answered in 50, 60 words and a really great video, right? Like that may be, how do I tie a bow tie? I had to learn to tie a bow tie. It is useless to read an article. Right? Like it is absolutely useless. What you want is a great video. Chances are YouTube is a search engine you're going to use for something like that, but that's still search to me. Right? But it's providing the right thing in the right way to the right user.
Let me pause your wizardry for a second, only because there's so much, and I want people to hear my stupidity as like a palate cleanser. I want them to be like, okay, hang on a minute. He's still talking. Right? So, what I heard you say without using these words is that with this new thing called passage indexing.
Yeah.
Is like every page is a site. Now, people have said this for a long time, and I tend to say any pages that you build that are hidden away from nav are things of beauty if they can into and unto themselves kind of deliver you some potential business. But we're talking two things at the same time. I'm saying I want it to convert, make me some business. You're saying, okay, also, but you need Google to want to give you the person on the front side of this. So when you're saying this the way we're saying it, and as we're getting ready to learn more about passage indexing and all that, you're saying like any blog post or even just a standalone page, the goal is going to be how expressive, how concise can I be, how well can I serve the question that the page or post has been made to answer? Am I accurate? And give us a little more there.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I can give two sort of core examples in my idea of I want to be able to rank for Rankbrain. It's a global concept. And I also want to be able to rank for subsets of it that make sense to rank for this very generic term. So a large piece, the 2,500, it's probably about a 3,000 word article that I wrote on that makes perfect sense in the context of what the user would want. And Google will be working to surface visually on the page, scrolling a person to the part, if they're in Chrome, where the answer, if they put, what is Rankbrain, just scrolling them to that part, highlighting it and going, this is the answer to your question, but it's part of a larger subset of information that you're probably also interested in. If I've looked up an error code for the text in the crowd and going, I'm getting this error code on my Windows, machine, or I'm getting this error code on my WordPress site.
Yes.
I probably need a very, very short page that goes error code fix, right? Like it probably can be summarized on Stack Exchange or some tech site on a forum that has one entry, two answers, one of which is voted best. It's not like it doesn't need a lot of robust content, but but you wouldn't want a long 3,000, 5,000 word page with every error code on it. That would be difficult to use as a user. And there'd be no reason a user would want to see all of them, right? Or very few users would want to see all of them.
Is it true and reasonable to say that the age of junk articles thus goes away a lot faster this way? Meaning, when you buy some nice person in Guam writing you 26 articles for $4, like is that going to exist for let's throw away affiliate marketing for a second, because I know there's some ways that still works. Yeah. But like normal people who want to like actually have people read their articles, I want to know about my 20 articles for $4 in Guam. And I want to know, is this going to help me against the coming AI apocalypse, which I can do today? I just had a guy show me this yesterday. It blew my mind. I could type 2 or 3 words into this AI and get a free sample of a massive blog article written for me with just 3 words, and the AI picks up the thing. Does this help with that? You can say no, or I have no idea.
It won't. Indirectly, it will, but there'll be other systems in play that come in to assist that. Now, I mean, you bring up a really, really interesting problem Google has. Google created their first problem one of the first problems back in, I think it was 2004, when they put a thing called PageRank, which they use it's how they calculate links, and they put a green bar up there and said, this is your PageRank. And immediately every SEO went, oh, mine's a 6. That's worth $500 a month for a link. I know that because I sold them, right? Like I bought and sold. I was a huge part of the problem. And going to your point, I was an affiliate marketer at the time, right?
Sure.
Like, so that's what I did. Now they have complicated systems now, and they brought in Rankbrain, which is the first iteration of AI or machine learning, I guess, into Google's algorithm. They've launched more. They've launched BERT, which just changes things in bi-directional. It can understand language a lot better. So now they can pick up the context of language and go, is this good content? But they've again created their own problem, because in pushing the boundaries on AI, a bunch of other people, like the one who is showing you the systems they have, also have access to the same systems. And Google's made a lot of them like free. Some of the best systems like TensorFlow and stuff, they've given us access to them.
Right.
So now we can use their natural language processing systems to train and generate content that sounds better than those 20 that a person in Guam could write. Right. To use the example. So we can auto generate and just spew these out at, I don't know, how fast is your machine? 1,000 a minute, right? Like 1,000 a second if you got a good enough machine or network of machines. So they've sort of created their own problem. At the same time, I think that's where we're going to be getting into a case of where links and not just links, but the trustability of a resource becomes more important, where I know I can trust Chris Brogan as an authority on branding and Chris Brogan. So I know he's not spinning out stuff. I know he's better than that, right? So we know that this is stuff just written by him. I know Dave's writing about SEO, and unless he's writing about AI and SEO, he's probably not using AI to spin out his articles, mostly because the publishers get super mad.
That's interesting though, because that gets me to, how I got invited to that world. 2009, I'm suddenly keynoting both places like PubCon and Affiliate Summit and all these other places I'm not normally invited, wherein everyone in the room is looking at me with their sharp knives out going, I don't know why you're here. And I'm like, I don't either. And what they were saying was because you wrote a book called Trust Agents and you wrote a book about trust. And like, turns out trust is important. And Google hasn't exactly figured out how purely to get to it. So all we know is that there are, a lot of links come in, a lot of links from trusted resources. If you sully your trust doing X, then it causes you downstream problems. That's 2009 though. That's, Penguin Panda came.
Yeah.
Again, you just said, and one of the things you're doing really well, seamlessly, by the way, is sort of hedging your bet, because it's not really out. The journal passage information is not there yet. You're speculating, and you don't like to speculate as much as I want you to. And how long is a piece of string was your answer to how long should a post be, which I'm grateful for, because it's a much better answer. How long do you need it to be? That's how long it should be. Right. Another piece of this puzzle, I think, for people like me who are not hoping to rank the best in the world, but do want to rank for something beyond just my name, which I am the absolute world champion of ranking for Chris Brogan. That's the only thing people search for, is who's that guy? If you want to start, taking on, we're working on a project where I'm going to want to rank for something. Mm-hmm. How do you even start that process? What does a lay person have to do? And then when do they get to the spot where like, oh, you totally need Dave Davies? Because like Carol was helping me plenty fine, and Carol saw my cancer and said, I don't know why there's cancer, but there's something going on. And you were like, oh, I totally know what this is. Right. Can you talk about that? I want to rank for something. I don't know how to rank for something. And then when do I F it up so bad I need Dave Davies?
You know what? It doesn't even necessarily get to be a case of screwing it up so much.
Okay.
It might just be a case of, to me, it all boils down to value, right? Like what is something worth? There are many tasks that I can do all day long that I don't, because I can earn more money doing my job,
right,
and pay somebody else to do those tasks, right? Mm-hmm. There are things that I do better than other people, or that I can get paid more for than I can pay somebody else who's better at doing their job, right? So we can all just do their job. And yes. But is it an unlearnable skill? No, at one point I didn't know SEO. I looked around, I went, oh, I think I can rank for like acne treatment, and I can sell $3,000 a month in somebody else's product. And this was like 2003. So like right. A month later I did. Like, it's a very different world now. So it comes down to what is the value is the first question people have to ask. If you're a lawyer charging $250 an hour, is it a good use of your time to try and learn SEO? Or is it better to just go, I'm going to charge $250 an hour, and I'm going to hire out an SEO to get this job done, right? That's the first question that you need to ask. One of the others is, do you have more time than money? Right. That's always, like with everything I do, that's one of the questions it ends up rooting down to. Do I have more time right now, or do I have more money? And if I have more money, I'll pay somebody to do the job. Sure. And if I have more time and it's interesting, I'll learn how to do it. Or if I have a lack of money and more time, which often those two things coincide, my lack of money and having an excess of time often sync up very, very smoothly. If that happens. But there are some telltale signs. There are some points where you've done everything, and each scenario is a little bit different, right? Like your scenario is different than if I was a startup with a brand new site, right? Or I've hired an SEO and I don't know whether it's going well.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a really, really frightening one. And I hate coming into those ones because I'm like, I don't really want to throw somebody under the bus here, but sometimes it's bad. Or sometimes I'm coming to their defense going, I think they've done everything they can. You've only given them 2 months. Right. And you're trying to rank for this massive thing. Like, this is not on them. This is on you. I couldn't do any better. Right. Like, just stay the course. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, when do you run out of patience? And sometimes you just need to contact an SEO, hopefully find one you can trust, who may just say, keep doing what you're doing. Okay. Who might say, oh, okay, you have more time than money, but why don't you just hire me? I'll do a quick audit. It'll cost you whatever that SEO ends up charging. I'm going to do a quick audit. I'm going to lay you out a game plan. Contact me in 6 months and I'll tell you how you did. Right. Like, just to sort of skip all the like fake reading, find one that you trust and just go, just tell me what I need to read and what I need to do. Right. That's so right. I can skip the like learning curve.
So now I want to rank for Burger Shuffler. I decided that my future is in burger shuffling. I could probably make a good revenue shuffling other people's burgers. I want to rank for burger shuffling. What do you do with that information? Meaning, what do you tell someone who's a lay person? This is okay. You made it clear. I know you want to do burger shuffling. Got it, Brogan. Now here's what you do.
Well, the first thing that I need to do is make sure that actually is the right decision, because I'll take on a job that I feel is worth it for the client. I won't if it's not. So my first responsibility as me is the money there for you, and are you making the right decision? Sometimes people, myself included, not really in the SEO space, but in different ones, are making the decision based on what they think is right in the absence of not understanding the world around them properly. And I'm horrible at this because I'll use technical terms in chatting with clients.
Yes.
Assuming that my world around me is filled with people who understand technical terms.
Sure.
Right. But I'm not communicating well. My job is to also be a communicator. I do a podcast. My job is to communicate well. So I used earlier, it was a horrible example to make, Rankbrain. A lot of the listeners probably have no idea what I'm talking about. There's no reason they should. Unless you're an SEO who cares about historical algorithms, there's no reason you should care about that specific one. So I should have picked a better example. So that's an example of my poor ability to, where I catch myself being as problematic as anybody else will. So the first stage is judging that. And then it's really just doing a competitive landscape analysis, looking at what site do they have, or if you want to really be a dream case for the client, contact them before you're having a site built. And then they can also just fix a lot of the problems before they happen and set out the content strategy before you're needing, one fixed. And then taking a look at, okay, how many links do your competitors have? How many pages do they have? How many pages do they rank for? What other things do they rank for? What other topical clusters do they have, within their site, content clusters that happen to be likely reinforcing other ones? So I want to rank for burger shuffler. Do I have pages on card shuffling and like shuffleboard? And like, I'm picking purposely non-related things, but do I have things that would be contextually related if this is a site about shuffling? Right? Like, if that's what this is, do I have all of that together? Or is it a site about burgers? Right now, the different ways you can organize burgers in a row, right? Like, do they have all of that? Okay, we can't copy it, but we can sure be inspired by it.
Right. I get that. So almost like, my old version of that advice is go look at someone else's fact page, of some space that you want, steal their frequently asked questions, and go write all your content. Have a nice day. Merry Christmas. You're done.
Now, one thing I'm just going to know, because you talk about fact or FAQ pages, everybody has them. I'm going to list because I have one on our site, and it's going to be gone in our new design. And it is based entirely on my wife's assertion that FAQ pages suck. And here's why. If you have an FAQ, and she's right, if you have an FAQ page, then it is a frequently asked question. Get it in front of them. Don't distract somebody out of your service conversion flow to go and find out the answer to it. That's not even me. That's my wife, and I just.
Your wife is so smart, and you're smart for marrying her. Kate has a question, and I want to try my version of the answer, and you can tell me I'm wrong. What's a simple explanation of passage indexing? My answer is, if you know what page indexing is, this whole page ranks for this thing really well, and that's how we have it in there's that. Passage indexing says this snip, this part, this paragraph or two with a heading, an H2 header or something in it, is what ranks well enough that it doesn't even matter what the other page stuff is. This is the thing that matters the most. How'd I do?
That's quite good. To list an example for everybody's sake, because I listed a very poor example earlier. But if we think of a page that is a glossary, pick whatever niche you are in, you have probably seen a glossary page, right? And it exists. It might be sorted from A to Z. It might be however it's sorted. It'll have a list of all the terms in your niche or sector. If you haven't, look it up in some sector you're interested in, or just go to Webster's, right? It's basically the same thing. Each of those entries would now be its own passage. So if I'm trying to rank for apple on a glossary of all things fruit, right? It would then be able to look at this whole page and see this whole list and go, apple, this is this definition, here's the information, and go, this whole page, I don't really care that this whole page is about fruit. What I'm going to surface is, this is the best example of a description of an apple that I have ever seen, and I'm going to surface that in the results. Now, on Google's end, it gets really complicated because they won't want the title and description when it appears in the search result to be all things fruit are glossary with like a generic description. They're going to now need to adjust the title and the description tag to reflect the intent of the user, which is to find information on Apple. So, but that we don't have to worry about. That's Google's job. or your SEO to figure out, okay, what are they doing to pull that out of my content, and how do I augment my content to make sure it's favorable on click-through rates. But that's at its core, is just grabbing a snippet off a page. So you pretty much hit it, just grabbing a snippet off a page and going, that is the entirety of what I need to judge. And I'm going to surface that by itself, and then moving the user immediately when they click that result to that section of the page. And somehow I believe they're going to start using light boxes and pulling it into a light box forward. But for right now, I think they'll just start with highlighting, which is what they're doing with featured snippets, and go, we're going to highlight it yellow and just jump them there and go, here's that content that we're ranking for you.
I think it's totally right. I want to end it here for only the reason that I'm sure everybody else is melted head. Carol would probably stay here for 5 more hours, so I can't judge by her. She loves you, so like this is, you know, everything at the foot of. And Kate, of course, is you know, a sponge too. She just loves it. So write 1 paragraph to a page? No, but I like that. That's very cute. Here's the one thing I want to end on, which is a weird thing to end on. Your name is actually also a public figure's name.
Yeah.
They're the very famous Dave Davies. So a man who has decided to become an SEO god, don't defer, you're so Canadian. You have to fight constantly by someone who gets a lot of juice because they're like indexed into a whole bunch of actual media engine stuff. Mm-hmm. Boy, it must be tricky. And how on this earth do you fight that fight? And then I guess very lastly, what URL today in the next 7 days do we want someone to actually go to find the best version of wanting to talk to you?
Fair enough. You can go to Beanstalk IM, the letter IM for internetmarketing.com. That'll be easy. And when everything changes, it'll just be redirected across. So it'll always work. Okay. As far as the battle goes, it came down to, I had to make the same decision I've had to give to other people. Is it economically worth it? Is somebody looking up Dave Davies actually going to give me money? Or are they looking up the band, like the Kinks? Chances are they're looking up the Kinks. And so it is not a battle worth fighting. Dave Davies SEO, Dave Davies, whatever, I'll rank for those. But yeah, to your point, I did early on, my ego was there, and I fought that battle, and I climbed up page 1, and I went, that has made me nothing.
right.
And so I just abandoned it, and I went, and realistically, I shouldn't. That Kinks guy should. He is serving the user's intent more. So leave it to him. And I just sort of piggyback now. I use him as an example in almost every presentation I do. If I get to use an example of a brand search result, I'll just use him and go, this is that jerk that I don't get. But there's just too darn many. The city I live in only has 250,000 people. There are 5 of us in the phone book. So
it's already over for them.
Yeah.
They're never coming near the front page of anything. They're on page 71 of their own town with only 5 of you. Listen, you're so smart. Like, I'm so glad. Beanstalk.im. And again, everything will point to the places it's going to point to.
Yep.
It means so much you took some time to explain this, because I mean, you've been educating me, and like, I don't have anyone to talk to about this. So thank you for talking with me about it.
Well, thank you so much for the time.